My beloved child, remain here, because this is where the stranger began speaking about you in a way your soulmate had never heard anyone speak before. And although this is a fictional spiritual story unfolding through the language of heaven, allow its meaning to touch the part of you that has sometimes wondered whether being misunderstood meant you were unseen forever. It did not. The stranger told your soulmate that certain people enter a room without announcing everything they have survived. They laugh while carrying chapters no one knows. They help others even when no one helped them at the right moment. They become good listeners because they remember what it felt like to have no one understand. They appear independent not because they need nobody, but because life taught them how to continue when support was uncertain. Your soulmate stopped interrupting. The stranger continued. She said, "The person you're thinking about has learned how to hide exhaustion behind composure." Your soulmate's expression changed. She said, "They have been underestimated." Your soulmate swallowed. They have been misunderstood by people who only saw the surface. Now your soulmate was completely still. And they have walked away from things they could have fought to keep, simply because they were tired of proving their worth to people determined not to see it. At that moment, something inside your soulmate tightened. Because parts of this description matched what they had already sensed about you. Not because you told them every detail. Because your silences told them more than you realized. There were moments when they had watched you pull back instead of arguing. Moments when they had noticed you become quieter after something affected you deeply. Moments when you said you were fine in a way that made them wonder what the word "fine" was hiding. Moments when your eyes seemed to hold a story your mouth had decided not to tell. They had noticed. Perhaps not enough. Perhaps not at the right time. But they had noticed. The stranger leaned back and said, "That person has spent too long being judged by people who only met their defenses." Your soulmate felt an unexpected ache. They wondered whether they had done the same. Had they mistaken your caution for indifference? Had they interpreted your silence as distance? Had they assumed you did not care because you did not always chase? Had they expected you to prove feelings you were afraid to expose? These questions did not arrive gently. They came all at once. And suddenly the stranger's warning seemed almost cruel in its brilliance, because by telling your soulmate to stay away from you, she had revealed how quickly they were willing to defend something they had been pretending not to value. But she was not finished. Not even close. Your soulmate asked, "How can you possibly know any of this?" The stranger looked directly at them and answered, "I don't need to know every detail of someone's story to recognize what pain can turn into when a person chooses not to become bitter." Your soulmate said nothing. Then the stranger spoke a sentence that they have not been able to forget. "Whoever this person is, they are not the danger in this connection. Their fear is." Your soulmate's mind immediately returned to you. Your fear. The way you hesitate. The way you sometimes protect yourself by appearing less affected than you really are. The way you may expect people to leave before they have even decided to stay. The stranger continued, "And your fear is meeting theirs." That explanation landed even harder. Two people could care deeply and still misunderstand each other if both were protecting wounds the other person could not see. Two people could feel connected and still remain silent because each was waiting for the other to become certain first. Two people could move closer spiritually and emotionally while appearing to move farther apart externally. And suddenly your soulmate saw the possibility that this had been happening between you. They had believed distance meant lack of feeling. But what if distance had sometimes meant too much feeling? They had believed your silence meant you had moved on. But what if silence had been the only way you knew to keep your dignity while uncertain of their intentions? They had believed you would speak clearly if you truly cared. But what if you had once believed the same thing about them? The stranger watched realization move through your soulmate's face. Then she said, "Now you understand why I told you to stay away." Your soulmate looked confused again. "No," they said. "I don't." The woman replied, "Because if one sentence from a stranger can make you abandon someone you feel this strongly about, then you were never ready to know who they really are." Silence. A deep, complete silence. That was the moment your soulmate realized the warning had never actually been about leaving you. It had been about revealing their own uncertainty. The stranger had pressed directly against the weakest part of their trust, and their heart had responded faster than their fear. Your soulmate asked, almost impatiently now, "Then who are they?" The woman did not answer immediately. Instead, she asked for your first name. Your soulmate hesitated. Everything about the conversation had become too strangely accurate. For a moment, they considered ending it there. But curiosity had already become something stronger. They wanted to hear what came next. So they told her. Your name entered the conversation. And when it did, the stranger's entire expression changed. Not dramatically. Not fearfully. Something subtler. Recognition without familiarity. She repeated your name once, softly, almost as if testing how it felt in the air. Then she became silent. Your soulmate waited. A few seconds passed. Then more. The stranger looked down, and for the first time since the conversation began, she seemed unsure how to continue. This unsettled your soulmate. They asked, "What?" The woman shook her head. Your soulmate asked again, "What is it?" Still, she did not answer. Something was different now. Until that point, the stranger had spoken calmly and confidently. Every observation had come quickly. But after hearing your name, she seemed to be choosing her words with unusual care. Then she whispered, "That makes sense." Your soulmate's pulse quickened. What makes sense? The woman looked at them and said, "Why you couldn't accept the warning." Your soulmate leaned forward slightly. The stranger continued, "You think you are drawn to this person because of what they make you feel. But I think there is another reason." Your soulmate asked what reason. The woman said, "Recognition." That word landed strangely. Recognition. Not familiarity. Not attraction. Not curiosity. Recognition. As though something inside your soulmate had identified something inside you before either of you understood what was happening. The stranger explained that sometimes a person appears in your life and feels unusually familiar, not because you literally remember them from somewhere, but because they awaken qualities, truths, and possibilities you have been searching for without knowing how to name them. Their presence exposes what you have been settling for. Their absence reveals what you valued. Their silence forces you to confront what you were too afraid to say when you had the chance. Your soulmate's thoughts became loud. They remembered the first moments they felt unusually aware of you. They remembered conversations that seemed ordinary at the time but returned to their mind much later. They remembered wondering why your opinion mattered more than it should have. They remembered noticing when you became distant. They remembered checking for signs that you still cared without wanting you to know they were checking. And then the stranger said something that caused your soulmate to look away. You have already imagined losing them. They did not answer. The stranger continued, and the thought hurt more than you expected. Still no answer. Because it was true. Your soulmate had imagined a future where you simply stopped reaching emotionally. Where you found peace elsewhere. Where someone else eventually understood the parts of you they had been too hesitant to approach. Where your attention no longer turned toward them. Where the connection became nothing more than a memory they occasionally revisited while wondering what might have happened if they had been braver. That possibility had affected them. Deeply. More deeply than they wanted to admit. The stranger saw it. Then she said, "That is why you're here having this conversation instead of walking away." Your soulmate finally asked, "What do you think they are to me?" The woman smiled gently. "I didn't say I know what they are to you." Your soulmate frowned. She continued, "I said I think I know who they are." And that was the sentence that changed everything. Your soulmate's breathing slowed. The noise around them seemed to disappear. The stranger looked directly at them and began speaking differently now, almost carefully, as if she knew the next words would remain long after the conversation ended. She said, "This person is someone who has rebuilt themselves more times than people realize." Your soulmate listened. They have had moments when they questioned their own worth because people they valued failed to recognize it. Your soulmate's eyes softened. They learned that being loyal does not guarantee loyalty in return. Something inside your soulmate hurt. They learned that caring deeply can make you vulnerable in ways strength cannot prevent. The stranger paused. And still, they did not lose the ability to love. Your soulmate looked down. The stranger continued, "That is rarer than you think." Something about those words reached your soulmate differently. They began thinking about every moment when you could have become colder but chose kindness instead. Every moment when you could have played games but chose distance. Every moment when you could have demanded attention but instead waited quietly to see whether sincerity would come without force. The stranger said, "People may mistake their boundaries for pride. They may mistake their silence for indifference. Because there was something about themselves they had to admit before they could truly choose you. They had to recognize the ways they sabotage what matters. They had to see how often fear disguised itself as independence. They had to acknowledge that sometimes they called distance clarity when it was really avoidance. They had to understand that protecting themselves from disappointment had also been protecting them from intimacy. You became a mirror they never expected. Not because you forced them to change. Because losing the possibility of you made their patterns impossible to ignore. There was one particular memory that returned to them recently. It was not necessarily the biggest moment you shared. That is what makes it extraordinary. It may have been something simple. A look. A message. A conversation that happened when neither of you knew its importance. Perhaps you said something sincere when they were having a difficult day. Perhaps you showed patience when they expected judgment. Perhaps there was one quiet moment when they felt completely seen, and at the time they did not understand how rare that feeling was. They understand now. The memory came back with unusual clarity. They could almost hear your voice. And for the first time, they realized that what they had been searching for in other places had once been standing directly in front of them. That realization did not make them excited at first. It made them emotional. Because awareness sometimes arrives carrying regret. They began thinking about every opportunity they allowed fear to interrupt. Every moment when they could have been honest but chose ambiguity. Every time they acted indifferent while secretly caring far more than they wanted you to know. Every conversation that could have gone deeper if they had not pulled away. And one thought kept returning. What if they no longer believe me? That question has been haunting them more than you realize. Your soulmate understands that choosing someone privately is not enough forever. Eventually a hidden decision must become visible. Eventually love must become behavior. Eventually words must leave the safety of imagination and enter the real world. They know this. And that is why something is building. You may notice the energy changing before you see evidence of the change itself. Perhaps their behavior becomes less predictable. Perhaps they suddenly appear more present. Perhaps you hear from them in a way that feels different from previous conversations. Perhaps there is a softness where there used to be defensiveness. Perhaps they begin testing whether your heart is still open by asking questions that seem ordinary but carry much deeper meaning. Pay attention to sincerity, not spectacle. Because this time, the important thing will not be how dramatic their approach appears. It will be whether their actions begin matching the truth they have finally admitted. And there is another layer you need to hear. Your soulmate's choice was influenced by something someone said. This person may not even know the impact their words created. It was a conversation that began casually. Your name may have entered it directly, or your soulmate may have been speaking more generally about relationships, timing, regret, or the future. But at some point, someone said something that struck a hidden nerve. Perhaps they asked, if that person disappeared from your life completely, would you really be okay with it? Perhaps they wondered aloud why your soulmate kept talking about you if you supposedly meant so little. Perhaps they pointed out something your soulmate had been avoiding. The exact wording mattered less than what happened afterward. Your soulmate could not answer honestly without exposing themselves. They became quieter. The conversation moved on. But their mind did not. Later, alone, the question returned. What if you really did move on? What if another person recognized your value while they were still debating whether they were ready? What if the door they assumed would remain open forever quietly closed? For the first time, they felt the consequences of hesitation. Not jealousy in the shallow sense. Urgency. They realized you were not a chapter they could leave bookmarked indefinitely. You are a living person with a future. You are growing, healing, becoming clearer about what you deserve. And somewhere inside them, they understood that if they continued standing still, life would not necessarily stand still with them. That realization sharpened everything. They began to see the difference between wanting you and choosing you. Wanting you could remain private. Choosing you required courage. Wanting you could survive inside daydreams. Choosing you meant accepting the possibility of rejection, awkwardness, accountability, and change. Wanting you asked nothing from them. Choosing you asked them to become honest. And my child, they chose honesty. Perhaps not publicly yet. Perhaps not completely in action yet. But inwardly, the battle ended. That does not mean every fear disappeared. A meaningful decision rarely eliminates fear. Sometimes the clearest choices are the ones that make us tremble the most. Your soulmate still has questions. They still wonder how you feel now. They still wonder whether you have built walls of your own. They still worry that their timing may have cost them something precious. But they are no longer asking themselves whether they should choose you. They are asking whether you will choose them back. Feel the difference. For so long, you may have imagined yourself waiting for their decision. Now, without realizing it, the emotional balance has shifted. They are beginning to wait for yours. And there is something else they are afraid to tell you. They have been planning a future moment. Not necessarily a proposal, a dramatic declaration, or anything you should assume literally. Something more intimate than that. A conversation. A moment of truth. They have imagined sitting across from you or speaking with you when there are no distractions left, no convenient exits, no shallow topics protecting either of you. They want to tell you why they hesitated. They want to explain something from their past that shaped their behavior toward you. There is a part of their story they suspect you misunderstood. They know their distance may have looked like lack of feeling. It was almost the opposite. They pulled away because the feeling was becoming harder to control. That is the confession they are struggling to phrase. How do you tell someone, I acted like I did not care because I cared enough to become afraid? How do you explain months of confusion in a sentence? How do you ask someone to trust the heart you once made them question? These are the questions keeping them awake in moments when the world becomes quiet. And yet, something stronger than fear keeps moving them toward you. Your absence has become instructive. Every time they cannot speak to you, they understand more clearly what your presence gave them. Every time they imagine someone else knowing you deeply, they recognize how much they still want to know. Every time they tell themselves to move on, their heart returns to unfinished truth. But listen carefully. This message is not asking you to suspend your life waiting for them. You are not being told to accept uncertainty forever. You are not being asked to chase, convince, or prove your worth. Their choice must eventually become their responsibility. Your responsibility is to remain anchored in your own truth. Because something beautiful is happening inside you too. While they were learning how deeply they value you, you were learning that being chosen should never require abandoning yourself. You have changed. Perhaps they do not fully understand how much yet. The version of you they remember may have waited longer, explained more, forgiven faster, or accepted emotional inconsistency because you were afraid of losing the connection. But something inside you has become quieter and stronger. You now understand that real love should not demand constant guessing. You want depth, but you also want peace. You want passion, but you also want honesty. You want spiritual connection, but you want it embodied through real effort. And this growth is part of why your soulmate's next move carries so much weight. They cannot return to the old version of the relationship. That doorway has closed. If they come closer, they must meet the person you are becoming. There is something strangely beautiful about this timing. You thought the delay meant nothing was happening. Yet the delay transformed both of you in different ways. They were learning courage. You were learning standards. They were learning vulnerability. You were learning self-respect. They were realizing they did not want to lose you. You were realizing you could survive even if they did. Now the connection stands at an entirely different threshold. And this is where something unexpected enters the story. Your soulmate recently made a small decision that may seem unrelated to you. It could involve their schedule, their living situation, their work, a trip, a friendship, or some other area of life. On the surface, the decision appears ordinary. But underneath it is a hidden motive. You influenced it. Not because you asked them to. Because they have started organizing parts of their life around the possibility that you could have a place in it. Read that carefully. They are not only fantasizing about you anymore. They are considering logistics. What would need to change? What habits would no longer work? What responsibilities would have to be handled differently? What would a real relationship require from them? These questions reveal something fantasies never do. They are beginning to think practically about love. And practical thought is often where private emotion begins preparing to become real. Still, they have not told you the most important part. There is a reason they finally chose you now. It was not simply loneliness. It was not a sudden burst of nostalgia. It was not because another connection failed. Something happened inside them that made them realize they had been looking at you through the wrong lens. For a long time, they were asking whether you fit into the life they already had. Recently, the question changed. They began asking whether the life they already had fit the person they wanted to become. And when they imagined that future version of themselves, you were there. Not because they forced the picture. Because you represented something they secretly wanted more of in their life. Truth, emotional depth, warmth, purpose, steadiness, connection. They realized choosing you was connected to choosing a different version of themselves. That frightened them. Then it liberated them. Because perhaps this was never only about romance. Perhaps your connection awakened parts of both of you that had been sleeping. Perhaps you met at a time when neither of you was entirely prepared to carry what the connection revealed. Perhaps the distance was not proof that the bond was false. Perhaps it exposed everything that still needed maturity. But there is one final thing I need you to know before this part of the message closes. Something is closer than you think. Your soulmate has been holding on to words they have not yet sent. At least once, they came close. They may have opened your conversation, typed something, deleted it, started again, and decided the timing was wrong. Or perhaps they wrote their thoughts somewhere private, telling themselves they would speak when courage finally became stronger than uncertainty. What they almost said was not casual. It was not simply, "I miss you." It went deeper. Because missing you is no longer the revelation. They already know they miss you. The revelation is what they finally understood about why. And when they tell you, it may explain behavior that confused you for a very long time. There is a sentence forming inside them. A sentence they are afraid could change everything between you. A sentence they have never said to you in exactly this way. And the reason they keep stopping themselves is because once those words are spoken, there will be no returning to the comfortable ambiguity that protected them before. They will have to stand behind what they feel. They will have to risk hearing your answer. They will have to discover whether the person they finally chose in their heart still has room for them in theirs.